Hey guys, JJ here, and welcome back to a new video on the channel. For today, I will be reviewing Supergirl. Just in case you missed it, there's a new Supergirl movie that came out in June. It is the latest entry in James Gunn's new universe for the DC characters. Last year we had James Gunn's Superman, or as some people like to call it, Superman 2025, and now we are at Supergirl in the year 2026. So a bit of background before we get into the review. I just wanted to say that I'm not the biggest DC fan. I really enjoyed some of the movies, well, the animated movies, the animated cartoons. I grew up on a few of them, and the comics. The comics are really cool. I'm specifically been interested in reading the Absolute Universe with Absolute Batman and Absolute Wonder Woman. Those look awesome, but I've never been huge, like hardcore superhero, well, DC superhero fan in particular, but just in general, I'm not the biggest superhero movie fan. The only superheroes that really stick out to me and that are among my favorite characters of all time, Spider-Man, and I don't know if this really counts as superheroes, but they're heroes. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So that's like the only real characters. Of course, I still like other superheroes like Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Batman, but they just were never characters that I had a really deep connection with. However, that doesn't mean that I can't enjoy the movies. Like I said, I really enjoyed a lot of the older animated movies. One that I watched not too long ago was Teen Titans versus the Justice League. I remember watching that a year or two ago, and I really enjoyed that one. And there are many others that maybe I'll put up on the screen. But for today, we'll be talking about a new live action film. And these are the ones I've been hit or miss on, but I can still find enjoyment in them. I really enjoyed Man of Steel a while back. I enjoyed the first Wonder Woman movie, well, in that universe. And then I also enjoyed the Superman 2025 movie by James Gunn. So going to this one, I was pretty excited. Just assuming that if I liked the last movie, I should like this one. But let's get into it. Let's see. Did I really like it as much as Superman? Did I like it more? Or did I like it less? With that long intro out of the way, let's actually get into the review. Okay, so for this review, I will have two sections. A shorter non-spoiler section, which is the one I'm going to go into now, and then a slightly longer spoilery section. Not that I'll be talking about too many spoilers, but just specific things that stood out to me for positive or negative reasons that I can't properly explain without bringing up what happens in the movie. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to mention was that, in case you didn't know, this movie is based or inspired of the Woman of Tomorrow comic. I won't be talking about it much, but I will bring it up in certain specific sections. But no real spoilers for that one either. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is the plot. So, despite this plot being a loose adaptation of the very beloved comic that I mentioned earlier, Woman of Tomorrow, which sets up a simple classic revenge and rescue kind of story. I think that's what they call it. But essentially you have Ruthie, which is the little girl in the story, who is hunting down the villain Krem for killing her family. And Supergirl reluctantly joins her because Krem poisoned her dog. That being Crypto. And she needs to track him down for the antidote. And given that Ruthie already was searching for him and might know more than Supergirl does, they have a bit of a team up and they work together to find him. The actual plot, not too bad. Simple, but not bad, and not too different, if at all, from the comic. The only real change was that in the comic, it wasn't her whole family that were killed, it was her father. But aside from that minor change, doesn't change a lot. It still works perfectly fine. And these sort of simple plots leave plenty of room for deep character development and character growth, and allows the writers to really hone in on not just who these characters are, but give them a complete character arc from start to finish. However, this movie kind of shoots itself in the foot with its really strict timeline. So, when Crypto gets shot, which isn't a spoiler because that's in the trailers, when he gets shot with the poison, he has 3 days to live unless Supergirl saves him. So, the timeline of the movie is 3 days. Its entire journey happens in 3 days. So, when they're forcing this whole story in such a short time, and for a kind of comically silly reason, not that Crypto being hurt is silly, but the fact that the villain hits him with a poison arrow that gives them exactly 3 days. Like, that is one of the most hilarious things to me. When I heard that, it immediately brought me back to watching like early Saturday morning cartoons when the villain would say, "You have 24 hours, 48 hours." Except in this case, it was 72 hours. So that was kind of crazy to me. I was not expecting that. I was kind of. I'm not gonna go too into that. I'll go more into the spoiler section when I talk about that. But essentially, what I'm saying is that because the time is so short, it doesn't really give the characters enough organic time to actually bond, making their growth I'm saying in quotations here, feel unearned or almost too quick. Like you will know it when you see it. If you've seen it already, then you probably know. Even if you already think that the movie had enough growth, like it's like a passing grade of enough growth, it still feels like there could have been more. I do think that they sort of limited themselves with that timeline, and maybe if they did another revision of the script, they might have been able to fix that so that we could have seen more happen. And that's one thing I will say. I feel like the actual plot, like I said, is simple but good. It's just a script, the way it's written, kind of, I wouldn't say falls apart, but there are a lot of issues that add up. Major emotional payoffs fall flat. Specifically, when Ruthie gives an encouraging speech to Supergirl in a certain part of the movie, when she is basically at a low point and is also physically, I think, paralyzed because she wasn't really moving. Ruthie gives her this encouraging speech, and she's explaining to her how much she's learned from her, but that doesn't really align with what the audience has seen up to this point. Supergirl has mostly been just barely scraping by in fights, with the exception of the one time that she was by Yellow Sun. And even then, she was still having a lot of issues with Ruthie. Like, they were always sort of back and forth. And I felt like there wasn't enough moments where they showed Ruthie getting this realization of, maybe Supergirl might be right about what she's saying. Or, oh wow, Supergirl is really capable. Because she does recognize that the first time she sees her under a yellow sun, but that's also kind of the only time she sees her at her peak before this speech happens. So I don't really, to me, I felt like there just wasn't enough shown there. Because if they were able to not necessarily just show Supergirl being more heroic, but showing more scenes where their characters actually grow with each other, because a lot of the time they're almost separated. Usually Supergirl is telling Ruthie to stay here while she tries to go and save the day, or she tries to protect her, but there's not a lot of time when we get to see them actually like talk or even just like question each other. There are one or two times, but not a lot. And especially since this whole journey is in 3 days, we can't even assume that there's much more going on between the scenes we've seen and what we're supposed to fill in the blanks with, because again, it's not very long. However, despite that, I still think that their dynamic is fine. It's serviceable, but ultimately restricted by the script. Instead of developing naturally through conversation, their relationship is held back by repetitive plot loops, with Supergirl fighting off threats and Ruthie, like I said, whenever they're apart. But a lot of the times when they're apart, she's sneaking off, trying to kill Krem or getting herself in trouble, and that leads to another thing that Supergirl has to do, or that the or that Ruthie has to figure out how to get out of. But what exactly is happening here? Why are there always these issues that are coming up? Who are these villains that Supergirl is constantly fighting? Who is the big bad here? Well, his name is Krem. And unless you read the comic, I don't think you're gonna remember that name from this movie. He is a weak, forgettable antagonist. He acts like a looming shadow over the script, but he lacks real presence or impact. Aside from the initial actions he did in the backstory of Ruthie killing her family, he never feels like a tangible, dangerous threat to the characters on their actual journey. At the end of the day, we know that Supergirl is way stronger than him, and the only reason why she's struggling is because they keep weakening her by putting her under different suns. And also, when she's not weak, he just so happens to have a poison dart ready, which I think is really silly. But aside from that, he doesn't really have a strong, like I said, strong presence, a strong personality. Not someone that you're gonna really think about after the movie and be like, wow, I can't believe he was like that. I can't believe he said that. Although there are a couple good lines in there, there are a couple, but those are like the only lines he says because other than that, he's just like making gestures, laughing, making these weird noises. And his design also feels a bit over-designed because I don't want to touch on the comic yet, but it feels like it's just extra fluff just to make him seem more intimidating, but he still doesn't give you that feeling. Oh right, Lobo's in this movie. He does absolutely nothing to move the plot forward or change the character's situations. Every time he is on screen, the story essentially hits the pause button, and his real value is just breaking up the repetitive cycle of Supergirl saving Ruthie from danger. And again, he's a fun guy. I think Jason Momoa plays him super well, and I get it, he wanted to play this role. I can see that he wanted to play this role, but this was just not the movie to introduce him, because I don't think the writer even cared about adding Lobo. They really just were like, this movie could probably use something else to spice it up a bit. And they thought, let's add Lobo, but they didn't really add him into the story, they added him into the movie. So he's there, but if he wasn't there, the story would not change a single bit. And the last thing I want to talk about are the visuals of this movie. As a superhero movie, which usually has a lot of CGI or a lot of practical effects combined with CGI and so on, you're always wondering how these movies are going to look. Well, I regret to inform you that I did not really enjoy the way this movie looked. The movie relies heavily on a gritty, serious, and dark aesthetic to distinguish itself from Superman, but it goes a bit too far in my opinion. It is overly brown, dry, and gray in a lot of areas, even black, to the point where you can't even see the characters, and I'm not even joking when I say that. There's maybe at least one or two scenes I can think of where I was generally looking for Supergirl or looking for the characters on screen, and this was in an IMAX theater. I feel like I should not have to do that. And then on top of that, the environments were very samey. Despite this supposed to be a space traveling adventure, the different planets and locations they go to all blend together. They consistently look like the same dark color palettes, mountains, cities, villages, rather than capturing any distinct or beautiful sci-fi scenery, which especially is disappointing because the material, the comic this movie is based on, has so many beautiful illustrations. My overall thoughts on this film? It's a completely fine but generic film. The core characters are recognizable variants of who they should be, but the film is ultimately held back by an unreadable color palette, an artificial 3D ticking clock, and a tendency to treat its characters like plot devices rather than letting them grow. When it comes to rating movies, I like to use letter grades as opposed to just numbers, because sometimes it could fluctuate depending on the day. I might think a movie's a 7, maybe then another time I watch it, it feels like a 7.5, but usually it doesn't go too far off. So at least the letters feel like a general area as opposed to a specific number. So we have S for spectacular masterpieces. We have A for amazing movies, just short of masterpiece. You have B, which are good movies. C for mediocre or okay. And D for bad movies. I give Supergirl 2025 a C.